Hi, my name's Kevin Holman, and today I'm going to do a session talking about how we can improve dynamically discovering and monitoring applications in SCOM and go beyond just basic infrastructure monitoring. So, this is a really important area that I think I see a lot of room for customer improvement, and I've worked with lots of customers on this over the years. I've seen a lot of their pitfalls, and so I want to talk a little bit about how to avoid them. So I'll talk with some of the experiences I've had with customers over the years and where I think most customers are at today. Um, I'll cover some of the things that I see customers do on a repetitive basis and the pitfalls that I've seen them have. We'll go over the tools that are really good that are out there to help you with your authoring journey, and then lastly, we'll kind of put those tools together, put them to use, and discover and monitor some business applications in a very consistent methodology. So today, most customers that I see, that I work with and talk to, they're very good at installing and deploying SCOM, keeping it relatively up to date. They're good at deploying the base infrastructure MPs and monitoring their infrastructure, tuning those MPs to a certain degree, and then they'll typically set up email notifications so that different groups or server owners get emailed when their servers or their applications have a problem. Some customers stop right there. That's as far as they go. They just don't take it to any other level, and that's okay if that meets your business needs. But more mature customers, and these are the ones that I tend to work with on a day-to-day basis, they do a much deeper level of tuning. They make sure that they're not collecting performance data that isn't necessary. They're not over collecting events. Every alert that they generate is actionable, if not ticketable. And speaking of tickets, they tend to integrate with an incident management system. So that gives them filtering, that gives them sometimes alert enhancement, that gives them auto ticketing capability. Sometimes that's one way, a lot of times it's two way, so that we can even see in SCOM which items are ticketed and what their current status is. These customers often develop automations around how they deploy the agent, how they patch the agent, how they decommission the agent when servers are decommissioned. They integrate that with their server lifecycle. They're more apt to develop recoveries and automations in the management packs themselves, so we only generate an alert when we can't fix the problem, automatically within SCOM. And then even with these mature customers, though, I see a widely varied skill set around MP authoring and the consistency applied to how they monitor these business applications. And so that's kind of going to be the cornerstone of what I want to focus on. So some of the pitfalls that I see with customers doing business application discovery and monitoring is caused by a lack of a consistent strategy when they initially set up SCOM and deployed it. I often find that customers don't document their processes, and it's very important that any SCOM team should have an operations guide. And that operations guide should dictate, of all things, a naming strategy. How we're going to name our management packs, how we're going to name our groups, how we're going to name our rules and our monitors. Anything that you're asked to provide a name for in SCOM, you should document a strategy around that. You should document your strategy around, the way that you're going to save overrides, the way that you're going to do groups. I see a lot of customers still using static groups today, and that means that the SCOM administrator is the one responsible for constantly adding and removing systems from those static groups. And that's a terrible way to operate. Ultimately, somebody is going to add a server to an application team and remove a server, and they're not going to tell the SCOM administrator. And so the customer has a false sense of that his servers are being monitored when they're not. So static groups are something we really want to get away from in SCOM. And then next is something I like to call override spaghetti. It's just where almost every customer who's ever run SCOM has dealt with this. Overrides over time just become a big mess. They get saved in a lot of different places. Part of the reason for that is not developing a good strategy for pre-creating our override MPs up front for each and every application or role or whatever it is. So one of the things I like to do is I like to just pre-create those as soon as SCOM is deployed. Go create overrides Windows Server, overrides SCOM, overrides base, IIS, overrides Exchange, whatever those roles that you're monitoring. Creating those up front and creating a home for them, and then ensuring that only the people that have rights to those systems are actually, they have the training, they know, where to save overrides. Don't grant people access if they don't know how to operate the system. That's another big challenge that I see. And then lastly, visualizations are all across the board. Some teams, people build all these dashboards and visualizations for, and other teams, they build nothing. And I think having a higher level of consistency will provide better results in the long run. And so let's talk about some of the authoring pitfalls that I see when customers try to develop monitoring for specific applications. The typical scenario that I see over and over is a customer will come to the monitoring team and say, I want to monitor this service on those 5 servers. And that's all they say. And certainly we can accomplish that. The age-old way of doing that was creating a monitor disabled for the service and then creating a static group of those 5 computers that they told us that they wanted, and then enabling that monitor only for that group. And that's effective. And if you're a small company and you're not going to do a lot of authoring requests, then I think that's fine. But any larger customer that's going to have a large amount of scale, this is not going to work out. One is we want to get away from static groups altogether because of the problems that I talked about. The second part of that is Health Explorer becomes almost unusable because of the sheer number of monitors that are going to build up over time that are disabled for 99% of the systems out there. So this is effective. I don't recommend it, though. I don't think it's a good way to go. I think it's something we need to progress away from in developing management packs the right way. So a second strategy that I've seen a lot of consultants use is using the Windows service template to discover applications. So that's great if the app request has a service, right? That's certainly one way to accomplish that task. There's a lot of downside to the Windows service template, though. So it asks you for a group right up front. And a lot of times you'll want to filter the amount of systems that are going to be part of the discovery based on a group, because it will discover every system in the entire company that runs a service, and that may not be what you have in scope for this specific customer, this specific request. And so again, we're back to static groups. Another challenge is that the XML that gets created by the Windows Service template is massive. It creates so many rules, so many monitors, so many discoveries, a bunch of overrides that it will cause management packs to grow into the hundreds of megabytes in size. I've definitely seen where customers do this, and any edit to their service template management pack will cause SCOM to lock up for like 10 minutes, and it's because it's such a big change. So and then there's some discoveries within the service template that run like every 60 seconds, and so that's certainly a worst practice. And if you have hundreds of these, that's way too much discovery data that's constantly going on. So I don't like the service template. I think it's effective for, again, smaller companies. If you're not going to do a lot of monitoring of services, then that's certainly one way to accomplish it. I don't think that's a best practice. And then some additional challenges with that are created if you use one of the two or both of the methods above is you don't always have a good class to scope notifications by or a good group to do visualizations. And so the what we're going to discuss next solves both of those problems in addition to all the other issues that listed above. And the way we're going to solve those problems is with tools. So what do we what do we create management packs with today in SCOM? The first thing is the SCOM console, right? We have the authoring pane of the SCOM console. Everyone's familiar with that. Another tool is a free tool from Silex called MP Author. And MP Author is a really good tool for the IT pro to do certain activities that can't be done in the SCOM console. And I'll demo those here in a little bit. And then Visual Studio. So this was something with the Visual Studio authoring extensions, or VSAE. We added that back in 2012. And that was a method to author management packs directly within Visual Studio. When this came out, I'll be honest, I absolutely hated it. I was just like, this is super complicated. No one's going to understand this. I don't understand it. It took a lot of dedication and practice to really learn how to use it. And I soon realized I never found a customer in the wild who was effective at leveraging this. And so it was really a tool for the developer who also had the challenge of making MPs. It was very rarely used by actual SCOM administrators or customers. And that has changed somewhat with the advent of Fragments, and I'll demo those, and they actually make using Visual Studio a whole lot easier. And then lastly, Notepad++. That's my XML editor of choice. I'm sure there's a lot more out there, but I find it really useful at navigating management packs when I just want to look at the XML. So let's take a quick look at these tools. So we'll start with the authoring pane of the console. This is, what everyone should be familiar with. This is where we have this collection of management pack templates, and they're pretty good at, writing SQL queries or looking for a process or, doing web URL monitoring. And also the Windows Service template that I discussed previously. All of those are in these templates. Templates just give you a wizard to create a lot of XML with a little bit of input. And then beyond templates, this is where we go create custom rules and monitors. So if I wanted to create a service monitor, a log file monitor, a performance counter monitor, this is where I would do those changes. And rules, same way. Event rules, alerting on certain things, rules to collect performance data. But the one thing you'll notice I can't do here is I can't create a class. There's no place for me to say, hey, I want to discover an application, right? And so we lack that ability in the console, and that's where we would kick over to something like Select. So I'll show MP Author. Let me close some of this previous stuff down. And so MP Author is that free tool, and it has the ability to create rules, monitors, views, a lot of the stuff that you can do in the regular console. But it also gives us the ability to create classes, and we'll do a demo of that here in a little bit. And then we also have Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is our method of with the management pack extensions, where we can create projects that are based on management packs for whatever version of SCOM that we're using. And then author management packs this way. And we'll also have a demo later of this one as well. And then lastly, of course, we have Notepad++. This is, a great XML editor. I like to use it because it's easy to find things. It's easy to copy and paste. It's easy to visualize the management pack because I can collapse things and look at just the things that I'm interested in, when I'm troubleshooting something or if I want to make a small change to a management pack. Okay, so now that we're introduced to the tools, what's the next step, right? I have a customer need to monitor, respond to, and visualize these critical business applications. So a customer comes to me and says, hey, I want to monitor this service on those 5 servers. How do I do that the right way? So the first thing is we need to find out more about, the application itself. Does it run, only on those 5 servers? Is it beyond that? You can start to ask some questions, and so then we'll discover the application. So we want to create a class or a target so that we can target our monitoring to it by dynamically discovering that application. Then we'll develop a consistent set of visualizations, and we'll use some standardized monitors and rules. And you can do this really easily. You don't have to be a ninja. You don't have to be this, expert from the day one. You just need to take that first step into changing the way you think about monitoring and the way you respond to customer requests. Instead of just accomplishing the task of, I'm going to monitor this service on those 5 servers, start to think in terms of applications. So the most important part of that's critical to being successful is getting targeting right. We need to discover the application based on something. And so these are the most common ways to discover an application. We may use the registry. We may use, a service exists. We may look for the existence of a file on the file system. We can run a WMI query, or we can write a script. These are, there's more than this, but these are the most common methods that we discover the existence of an application. So remember, start small, use these tools, and just be consistent and build your library as you go. So some of the best practices that I like to implement are create 1 MP per application. So when a customer comes to you and says, I want to monitor this service on 5 servers, ask them, hey, this service, is that part of an application? What's the name of the application? Are there other servers that run this application? Find out more than what they're specifically asking you so you can develop the management pack in a way that you're not going to have to rewrite it or change it down the road. So I like to start with like my company ID. So, this is like ABC Chemical Company, and I've got an application for my antivirus. Maybe I've got a security tool that runs on all my Windows servers in the infrastructure. And then sometimes customers come and they don't have an application name. Maybe it's an internal app that doesn't have a name or doesn't really, it's something that's developed internally. So I'll just use the business team name. Usually in your customers will have some name of the team that's requesting this, and you can just use that in lieu of a commercial application name. And then we'll provide that template. We'll say, okay, we consistently, every time we write an application MP, we're going to include a folder, a state view, a group, the service monitors if there's a service. Maybe I'm always going to include recoveries, whether I enable them or not. You can pre-create some of this stuff with these templates and tools. So let's start by just doing a demo of creating a class target. So for this, I'm going to use Silex MP Author, and I'm going to create a new management pack. And I'm going to call this ABC Security Scanner. And I'm going to save it to that same directory. And I'm going to choose, whatever version of SCOM that I'm running. I still have customers with 2016, so I tend to develop for that. And I'm going to choose an empty management pack. And we'll say finish. So that's created by management pack. And if I click through it, there's nothing in here. There's no classes, no discoveries, no rules or monitors. But you'll see right here in the left-hand corner, the very first thing is classes. That's what we're going to work with because we want to create an application class. So I'll right-click classes. And our options, oops, sorry. Our options are we can do registry, script, or WMI. Those are the ones that Silac gives us out of the box. Most of the time, when I'm discovering an application, I can find it in the registry. That's usually what I use. I would probably say 97% of the time. And occasionally I'll run into apps that don't write anything to the registry, but they'll have something specific on the file system at a specific location. And in that case, I'll use a WMI query just to look for the existence of a file. But we're going to do registry. So I'll say new Windows registry class. And I can browse any machine on my network to go pull from that registry. So if they gave me a server name for someone that has the service, I can use that. And I'll browse the registry. And let me show you where I'm coming from. It's HKey local machine, system, current control set, services. This is a list of all the services on the box, and there's the one I'm looking for, my security scanner service. That's the one that I want to dynamically discover that as my application, and then I can start developing monitoring for it. So I'm going to add that in. And I'm just going to do a little cleanup here. Some of the default stuff I don't always like. I have a naming standard, so I'm going to go ahead and adhere to that naming standard. So I'm just going to call this my ABC Security Scanner class. That looks good. And the base class is Windows Local Application. Now, that's a great default. That is a class that we wrote specifically for you to write applications based off of. So we're going to accept the default. And here's my discovery, and I can see I need to do a little cleanup there. So my security scanner class discovery, perfect. All right. Now, the next thing it asks me for is where do I want to run this discovery? And it defaults to Windows operating system. Now, that will work. It's not the best class. And the reason I say that is because Windows operating system is something that actually clusters have an instance of. And so this potentially can discover duplicates if you have clusters. If you want a cluster-aware application discovery, maybe this is a good class for you. Most of the time I don't. So I prefer Windows Server operating system. This is my recommended kind of generic target class of choice in most environments. All right, and then it just says, hey, I'm going to check for the existence of this registry key. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. I'm going to say next, and we're going to run every 1 day, and that's fine. I'm not expecting my applications to get installed and uninstalled really quickly. And even though it says run every 1 day, it will run as soon as you import the management pack the first time, and then it'll be every day after that. So we'll get results really, really quickly. So that's it. I've created a management pack, and I've written my first target class, which is based on the existence of a registry key, which happens to be a service. And at this point, I can deploy it and save it. And I can deploy that right into my management group. Now, I've already actually deployed this management pack. And so let me show you what that looks like. If I go into monitoring and discovered inventory, I can see that, there's my class. And out of all, I think I've got 30 systems in this management group. I've discovered 4 of them already. So it's not monitored because we haven't written any monitors. But again, this is the dynamic discovery. So sometimes I like to start with just a discovery so I can find out, is this really all that's out there? Did the customer said, oh, these 5 systems have this service. Maybe I come back with 100 systems, and then I got to go back and talk to the customer and find out, hey, which ones of these need to be monitored? Why am I discovering so much more? But there's a perfect example of, writing a class and dynamically discovering an app. Okay, so we talked about doing a lot more though. We talked about folders and state views and kind of coming up with this consistent template for every app that we're going to deploy. So how can we accomplish that easily? Well, this is where Fragments really come to the rescue because they combine everything just like what we did in a single easy action. And so now I want to demo using a combo fragment to do the same thing we just did, but in addition to add a whole bunch more monitoring into it. So for this, I'm going to use Visual Studio. So I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to use 2016. And I'm going to call this, here, I've already got it, ABC Security Scanner. So we're just going to keep developing for that same application that we have on our network. So I give it a name and a solution and a location to save it, and I'll say OK. And I'll just overwrite whatever's been done before. All right, and so here's my management pack. It's completely empty. So I'm going to choose to add an existing item. And I'm going to go look at, I've got a ton of fragments. Oh, I thought I saved them over here. Let me find them on my network then. So these fragments, I've got a whole 8-part series, and I'll include a link at the end of this that walks you through how to use fragments in Visual Studio. I've got a ton of YouTube videos on this. So we're kind of jumping right into one if you've never used this before, but it's actually quite easy. My 8-part series, you can actually go step through parts 1 through 8 in just a couple hours and have a lot of hands-on experience using that. So what we're going to do is I have something called a combo fragment that literally includes a dynamic discovery for a service monitor, a recovery for that monitor, the computer group with watchers, views, a folder, everything all in one management pack, and we only have to answer a few questions and it'll create all the monitoring for us. So I'm going to select this particular fragment and bring it up. And within the fragment, we can see it's got instructions. It says, hey, this is a combo fragment of a class, discovery, a monitor, all those things we talked about. And it also tells us what we need to replace. So these are the 5 things, the 5 pieces of information that we need to provide, and then it will start monitoring, create the entire management pack. So with that, let's get started. So I'm going to replace company ID with ABC. And let me replace all. And then my app name. I'm going to find that and then replace it. And I think I was using ABC. I think I was just using Security Scanner. Let's do that. And then the reg key path, that is, I can never remember. Oh, here we go. I've got an example right here in the instructions. So this one is CCM exec, but I can pretty much get it from there. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to find my reg key path, and we're just using find and replace, and there we go. And so it's not CCM exec, it was ABC Security Scanner. There we go. I'm going to replace all of that. And you can see what it's actually doing down below. It's replacing the different bits of XML with whatever we've told it to replace it with. And then lastly, I need a service name. So we're going to find that and replace it with ABC Security Scanner. And then lastly is a unique ID. Now this is just in case I want to reuse the same fragment multiple times and I need to give it something unique. Most of the time I'll just duplicate whatever the service name is. So I'll do that here. And we'll just call this ABC Security Scanner. There we go. So everything down in the management pack should now be replaced. And sure enough, there it is. There's my class. I've got a group. I've got a monitor type for the monitor. Lots of good stuff in this thing. I've got a discovery for the application, a discovery for the group. I've got rules that have to do with the recovery action. I've got a monitor for the service. I've got a recovery for the service. I've got an alert view, a state view. Look at all this stuff. I didn't have to. That would take me an hour to create that in the SCOM console. And literally, I had to do a find and replace on 5 things. And I went really, really slow on that. So let's save it and build it in Visual Studio. Now, this is going to fail. And I want to show you why, because, so it tells me, hey, I can't find this instance group library. And that's, if you watch some of my videos, I walk through how we do this. Since we used a group, we need to create a reference in our management pack for the instance group library. So I'm simply just going to add a reference. And there's my instance group library. I'm going to select that. Now I have that reference. I'm going to save it and build it. And look at that. Build 1 is successful. All right. So there's our management pack. Let me then import this guy. I'm going to go into installed management packs, import, add from disk, and I'm going to go into my security scanner, bin debug, and bring in that XML. Now I'm just doing an unsealed management pack, and I'm just going to overwrite whatever I had that was already there. All right, successfully imported. And now we'll take a look at some of the stuff that created, right? So just one Visual Studio fragment brought into one Visual Studio project, and I have created a ton of monitoring. So one of the first things you'll see over on the left is I now have a folder, because this was part of my fragment, that adheres to my naming scheme, which is my company ID and then whatever the application is. And I automatically get alert views and state views as well. So I'll go ahead and click on that. Yep, and they're showing up. And notice that I'm starting to get some health state, and that is simply because I also included a monitor in this. And so if I look at Health Explorer for this guy, there is a security scanner service monitor that's built in. On top of the service monitor, if I look at the properties of that, there's a recovery, an automatic recovery, which is a really good script-based recovery that I use with a lot of customers. Now it's set, run automatically is set to no. I don't enable the recoveries out of the box. So if you wanted to enable this recovery, you would just simply edit this particular recovery and say run automatically, or you could create an override for it if you had sealed this MP. But as you can see, a lot of monitoring gets created by this. Oh, look, I already have some services that are not running that were detected. So I'm starting to see that these monitors, yep, this is definitely not running on this particular box. And I'll bet I have some alerts. Yep, there we go. I have some alerts from some of these as well. So you can see that it's right out of the box, all that monitoring, all that dynamic discovery, it's working perfectly. Another thing I want to demo is groups. So I included a group in that combo fragment. So if I go search for ABC, let me do a refresh. There it is. So security scanner, computers, and health service watcher groups. Some of you may remember it's kind of hard to add health service watchers into a group based on Windows computers. You have to edit the XML to do it. Well, since we already had that code in our fragment, I don't have to do anything. It's already included in the management pack. So if I right click and say view group members, there they are. I've got 4 computers and 4 health service watchers. So I can now use this group to scope notifications, to scope views in the console. I can show an up-down view just for this application. And so let's go ahead and do that as well. So if I go into monitoring, maybe I want to add more stuff to this. Now I can keep using fragments for whatever I have fragments for, or I can use the console. So if I say, hey, let's create a new state view, and let's call this computers, and we're going to scope this to the Windows computer class, but we're going to filter it for our security scanner computers group. Okay. So now I can give my customer not only a view of the health state of their app in real time, but also all the computers hosting their app. Because sometimes the computer could have something unhealthy like low free disk space. It's not really application related, but sometimes an application team would want to know that. So very quickly I can do this. Another thing that's really nice, once I've established that target for this, if the customer comes back and says, oh, I need to monitor a performance counter on my specific app servers. So I'll do just a single consecutive samples. I'll save it to my ABC security scanner management pack, and I'll just call this CPU monitor. Maybe they want their own values or their own alerts, and that's fine. I now have a class that I can target that represents just their application servers. So this makes subsequent monitoring development super, super simple. You can see how easy this is to grow from once I have the basic discovery down using a fragment. Lots of good stuff here. All right. So some recommendations, I talked about this earlier. Document your naming standards. Come up with an operations guide that says this is how we do things in our SCOM environment. If you've already got one, great. You're way ahead of most people. And if you don't, I strongly suggest you develop that. Come up with those standards, because if you're doing it by tribal knowledge and verbal commands, it's not going to work very well. Document what they are. It's going to help new people that join your team, and it'll help you remember how you're supposed to do things, because not everybody authors on a daily basis. So there's lots more than just MPs, groups, rules, and monitors as far as naming goes, but that's a good place to start. Be consistent. When you're developing app monitoring, use templates, fragments, use things wherever you can that make it very simple and repeatable. The same thing goes for notifications. I've seen notifications just get all messed up. Come up with a strategy that works well for your applications, and then you won't have to treat these any different than Windows Server or Exchange or SQL or those other things that you're already monitoring in your infrastructure. One of the things that I do like to recommend, I've worked with one customer extensively on this, is developing a standard questionnaire. So don't wait for a customer to come to you and say, I want to monitor this service on 5 servers, these 5 servers. come up with a questionnaire so that when they approach you for monitoring, I don't know if you go through like a ticketing system and how your internal customers approach you, but when they request monitoring, send them a questionnaire that asks all the questions you're going to need to develop a really good management pack. So that would be, hey, you're asking for service monitoring. Is this an application? How would I discover that app? Are there any reg keys? Are there any Windows services that are consistently on all of my application servers? Do you have any different roles? I need to know that up front because maybe one class isn't good enough. Maybe I need 3 or 4 classes to discover each role independently. And then talk about other things that may need to be monitored above and beyond just what they requested. And then what actions are they going to take? If you're going to generate alerts for this customer, are they going to do something with those alerts? So do they need an email notification? Do they need a ticket to be created? We want every alert that's asked for to be actionable. And we want to have an alert owner assigned to those things so we don't just stack up alerts in SCOM that everyone's just ignoring. So developing that questionnaire will really help you write a better management pack out of the gate. And then additional resources. So I do have this 8-step series that uses Visual Studio with Fragments, and it's very step by step. It starts with creating your first project in Visual Studio to doing a class. It doesn't use combo fragments. It's very independent, so you're doing each thing as a separate module, but it'll help you build muscle memory in Visual Studio, and you won't hate it. I mean, it's if you can find and replace, you can absolutely use it. There's just a couple gotchas, and I cover those in the step by step. So I've got a link for where you can go get the Visual Studio authoring extensions. I've got lots of videos. I've done a lot of sessions on the Select Management Pack University, and so go watch those. I've got some links to some of my previous sessions there. Download a copy of MP Author for sure. I can't imagine any SCOM administrator not having this already. And then, we did a combo fragment, which is a little bit more advanced in this demo. So I have a video that pretty much walks through very similar to what we did today. So if you want to, rewatch that, there's another good session there in this link. So with that, I'd like to open it for Q&A, and I'll take your questions. And I'd also love some feedback. For the people that are doing this, and I know tons of people are using my fragments already. I get so many management packs through support asking for help, and I'll go look and I can see all this code that, code examples that I've written and published. So I know people are using these fragments all over the place. But what I'd really like is for the people who aren't using them yet, who watch the session, who maybe don't feel like they're doing a great job with application specific monitoring. What's the most challenging part? Help me understand where you're most challenged from a technical perspective and being more effective, because maybe there's something I can write or develop to assist with that. And then any ideas that would make this process easier. So one thing I didn't touch on in this session was Select MP Author does have a professional version that does leverage fragments and makes it incredibly easy, way easier than even using find and replace. So if ease of use is really critical to you adopting this, I do suggest you kind of go look at their higher level packages that take it to the next level. So any other ideas about things to make it easier, I am all ears. I'd love your feedback. And with that, I'll stand by and take some questions. Thanks for watching.